Welcome to Negotiate Value Lesson 10. We're at the midpoint of the course. We're wrapping up the module Know Thy Benefit, all about knowing what drives your value. And we're moving into the module Push the Potential, which is about identifying your options and developing your options. And I'm going to ask you a strange question that actually bridges those two modules. When's the last time you heard an ultimatum? Well, you probably heard an ultimatum or two growing up, maybe something like clean up that room or else, or don't make me stop this car. Or my favorite from the old TV show, please don't make me angry. You won't like me when I'm angry. You remember that? It sounds like a threat. It is a threat, in fact. It's also a negotiation tactic. In these cases, we're having negotiations about behavior, saying, I want this kind of behavior or there'll be this kind of consequence. There's this desired outcome, and then there's an or else. And what we're talking about in this lesson is that or else. What happens when he stops the car, when he gets angry? Or more to the point, what happens when you don't get the price you want in a negotiation? What happens when you ask for a little bit too much and the other party walks away from the table? Well, what that is, what your options are going to very much determine your success in negotiating, especially when you know them ahead of time. So we're going to talk about that in today's lesson. And the great thing is, we don't really have to fear the or else anymore. We're going to go through a homework exercise that's going to teach you to take a little of the pressure out of that or else and move forward with more confidence. So let's talk about the key term here, which is BATNA, B-A-T-N-A. You've probably heard this before. It's an acronym, and it simply means the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you don't come to agreement, if you don't have a meeting of the minds, if you come to loggerheads, then what happens? Your BATNA happens. That's where your options play in. And the better your BATNA is, the more power you have in the negotiation. So let's play that out in what could be a real-life negotiation. Let's say that you wanted to build a deck on your house. You had a carpenter come and give an estimate for the deck. His estimate was $3,000. That sounded like too much to you, so you countered. You say, well, I think you should do it for $2,000. I'll pay $2,000. And he says, no, I'll come down to $2,800 and I'll do it next week, but that's the best I can do. And you say, well, how about $2,400? Would you do it for that? But he says no. And that's really all you want to pay. So what happens then? There's no agreement, and you haven't come to a price that works. Now, what happens then really depends on your BATNA. It depends on what your options are, what your BATNA is. So if you're in a position where you've got 2 more appointments with carpenters that afternoon, and you've got a previous estimate in hand for $2,500 to build the deck, then that $2,800 price doesn't look so great. And you might say, see you later, buddy. I'm going to go on and work with somebody else. Now, let's imagine a different scenario. Let's say you've been trying for months to get somebody to come and look and just give an estimate. It's hard enough to do that. He's the only guy that you've been able to see. He can do it next week. And the following weekend, you've got family coming in from out of town and you're hosting a family reunion and you want to use that deck. So that's a different situation where the alternatives to not agreeing with this carpenter are not nearly as good. And so you might be motivated to go ahead and pay more than you want to get the deal done and to move forward. Now that's an example of the BATNA in action. What we've been going through in this module of Negotiate Value is all about the benefit, what drives the benefit, the characteristics of the benefit, and ultimately what goals you're moving toward with the purchase. Now let's apply this to this scenario we were just talking about, the deck. So if your goal with the deck is to make more use of your backyard, well then maybe there are a few more options. Maybe you could build a patio, but maybe, or maybe you could just use some other vendors. But you need to know what the benefit is and what the goal is and what you're moving toward. Now, let's say the goal was to increase the value of the house. That's a different goal, and that gives you different options. Perhaps you could take that money instead and put it into the kitchen or do something else with it. And it may mean you have more flexibility than just building the deck. So this is how the work that we've done in defining our benefit and understanding the features and the goals, all this fits into more options and knowing what you can do and what other choices you have when you're in a negotiation.